My name is Kevin Schmidt. I am currently the president of the Neffs National Bank and vice president of Neffs Bancorp. I started here in 1994 as the special assistant to the president, which at that time was John Remaley. In 95, I became the executive vice president. I joined the board in 2004 and I became president in 2009. If you go back to 1923, a group of prominent businessmen in the area decided that this community needed a financial institution to provide the financial services. And since then, Neffs Bank has been the heart of the, I like to say that they've been the heart of the community and committed to the community. During that era, there used to be a number of other banks. You had Egypt Bank, you had Schnecksville Bank, just a number of banks around the area. And they all sort of merged or faded away. But Neffs remained true to its identity and remained true to being an independent community bank. One thing I think that separates us from some of what the other banks were was the commitment to remaining independent, but also in our commitment to the community is it's not only the organization as a whole that's committed to the community. We have our directors, our employees, our shareholders all live and work in the community. Community is integral to the Neffs National Bank. There's an old saying that however the community is doing is how the bank is doing, and how the bank is doing is how the community is doing. So if we prosper, the community prospers. If the community prospers, we're going to prosper as well. So their successes are our successes, and we can't have one without the other. You know, the funds stay here within the bank, within the area. So we make our loans, and also even our loans, you know, all of our loans or the decisions are made locally here. It's made by the board, which is made up of community members. This has been like a humbling experience for me, you know, coming to the bank and becoming the president here. When you look at the directors on the wall and what they went through, when you think about it, they were here, the bank was only in, you know, started 6 years in 1923. And we had the largest depression in 1929. Can you imagine? You've just started a brand new bank and you're faced with massive layoffs. The economy is in ruins and a massive depression, and you just started this bank. So when I look at the directors on the wall, you know, what they've gone through, what the challenges, the wars that and everything that's gone around us, and how they were able to succeed, it's very humbling. And even when I walk out, you know, into the lobby and I see like the tellers or I see the employees, and not only their current employees, but you're thinking about how many that have come before me. What were some of the older employees and how the bank has changed. And then you look at like the entranceways, you know, this is where the customers used to come in. They came in here and they came over here. But you literally think of the thousands and thousands of customers who have come in here. You know, someone from a little girl who's opening her first deposit account to someone who's getting their first mortgage, going full cycle to, you know, unfortunately, we'd be having their estate account. So it's the full generation and it continues. And when you think about that, that's, you know, that's community.
I am John Remaley. My current position with the bank is president and board chairman emeritus of the bank and the corporation. I've been with the bank since June 1st of 1953 as an employee, but before that, I cut the grass at the bank as a teenager for 3 years. Now, I know that doesn't serve as my time as an employee of the bank, but I really started as an employee in 1953. So I have 70 years of service, counting my military service as credible. The Neffs National Bank, formed in 1923, had various series of national bank notes. There was a series of 1902, which was the large size note. 3,961 sheets of the large size notes were printed. They contained 3 $10 notes and 1 $20 note. The Neffs National Bank also issued small size currency, and there were two types of small size currency. Type 1 had the bank's charter number in black ink on the face of the note. Type 2 had the charter number printed 4 times on the face of the note in black ink. There were 1,688 sheets of type 1 currency produced and 2,168 sheets type 2 currency used. And these sheets were then placed in existence when the bank opened for business. Here is an example of a $20 note. Just in case you've never seen it, here's a $1,000 note. These have now been withdrawn from circulation. This particular national currency note is serial number 1, signed pen and ink signatures by Calvin Hill and Irvin Lengel. The uniqueness is it is number 1. There's never going to be another one like it. It had stayed in the Lengel family during Mr. Lengel's lifetime, passed on to his daughter Ruth, and then passed on to the bank for posterity.
Tell me about the things in the display cabinet. Is there anything in there that you remember?
Well, there are various pieces in there that I still remember. The significance of each individual piece, I don't, but the era during which they might have been distributed, I remember. Let's take a look at it.
Okay. Right. So
This display are the rulers that the bank gave out each year. And the bank gave a ruler to our customers and the patrons every year successively. I believe there's only 1 year missing. The other memorabilia are pieces of advertising that the bank gave out from time to time, from its very beginning to today.
yes.
And as items became available and were significant on the era, we tried to tailor our advertising to what was popular at the time. Mr. Lengel, Irvin Lengel, was the cashier of the bank when I joined the staff and ultimately became the president of the bank. Mr. Lengel was quite the gentleman. I don't know of any question that I asked of him that he did not give me an answer that was educational, and probably he was looking to further my education within the field of banking. And Mr. Lengel was quite the gentleman in church, a very active church member, but a fine person.
My name is Ruth Lengel Hensinger, and I'm 98. I'll be 99 in November. I grew up in Neffs because my father was hired to start a bank and be the first cashier. He was the only one in. He was just the cashier, just one person. And he did all the jobs of the teller and everything else. There was only one person for a couple of years until they hired Robert George, who was from Slayton. So I asked him one day, well, who was the first person that you had that came in the morning. He said, a man by the name of Geiger. And I can't remember which Geiger it is, but one of the Geigers was the first attendant at the bank. The bank closed at the end of the day. He'd come home, change clothes, and go out to the farmers and help them with their crops. That's how he got stockholders. He'd work with them, and he'd get all these people to put money into a share of the bank. He worked hard for it. Just as one room. You walked in and there was everything. The desk and everything. I remember that. You walked in and they took care of you, and then you walked out. And that room went to the hotel, was part of the hotel. It was just a little tiny room. And then finally the bank building was built. It was cold. And my mother said, now we're all going down, they're going to dedicate the bank today. So we all got dressed. All right. And this is me. Now some of these men are from Philadelphia. This is Robert George. And this is Calvin Hill. He was the president. This is Reverend Erfer right here. This is my father. A lot of banks had to close, and so they had empty buildings. So I went with my father. They went to Kempton. That bank was closed, and they bought the vault door. That was a big, heavy door, and it's timed with something in Allentown. You know, they can't just open it. And I went with him to see this door in Kempton. And then they bought that door and had it transported to Neffs, put into this new building. My father, when he left home, he went to Muhlenberg. He was going to be a minister. And then when he got there, most of the fellows had their numbers drawn for World War I. So they closed the college and they sent him home. So what he did, he went to business school and took up business work, and then he was hired by the Leesport Bank. And that was his first job. And then one day, a bank examiner came up from Philadelphia to examine their bank. And he said, there's a group of people in Neffs, up in Lehigh County. They want to have a bank. They have some stockholders already, but they want to have someone to take charge, to continue, be the bank head, the head of the bank. So my father said, I'll do it. So but they had two stipulations. He had to be married, and he had to have a house to live in. So he went up again, and he found the home at the corner of, it's on Main Street. And the woman owned the home, but it was empty. And they said, they said they'll contact her, and maybe they could rent it for a couple of months till you find other living quarters, which is what he did. But he had to get a wife. So then he knew he was in contact with my mother, and he asked her whether she would marry him. And that's how he married my mother. And they were married Christmas Eve. Over there on the table is my Bible. And in the beginning of the Bible is the whole description of their wedding. They got married Christmas Eve at the Christmas program in their church. And that was a big carrier those days. Church was a place where everybody went. There were no fire halls or anything like that. But they had all came to church. And in there it says there were over 1,000 people there. So and both my mother and father were in charge of the program. So after they were finished, the pastor said, "Now don't leave yet. We have a surprise for you." So my mother and father came out and they were married with all these people there. So they had their all that was their wedding. Then they had the dinner the next day on Christmas Day at his folks' place. And the next day, or that night, they drove to Neffs. And he opened the bank the next day.
My name is Ronald Gildner. I worked for the bank 45 years, from 1973 to 2019, till I retired. Mr. Lengel was the president of the bank when I was hired here. Just a little story about that. Mr. Lengel was the first president I worked under, and then Mr. Metzger, Mr. Remaley, and Mr. Schmidt. Each president had their own way of doing things, and it was interesting. It worked out well. The only thing I'd like to say is happy 100th anniversary to the Neffs National Bank, to the directors, the officers, employees, and most of all, the customers, because without the customers, we would not need the bank.
My name is Paul Schneck. I was born in 1931. I've been with the bank, I can trace back 74 years, back to 1949. When I worked in Neffs Farm Equipment, I bought my first vehicle, which was a 48 Salisbury scooter. And Neffs Bank worked with Neffs Farm Equipment, and we set up a payment plan. My grandfather, James Lochner, was a bank director there for 28 years, and he was on the building committee in 1937. I like banking at Neffs because they helped me from the very beginning. My uncle, Ray Schmidt, was working there. He helped me purchase one of my first cars. Right now, I work with Charmaine, very helpful. And through the years, I've been helped with Ronnie Giltner and a lot of names, Martha Lutz, Betty Kern, Jean Lofter. My daughter worked there. Yes, they were very friendly and helpful because I didn't know anything about finances.
My name is Robert Heinzelman. I've been serving as an outside director of the Neffs Bank Corp. Incorporated and the Neffs National Bank since October of 1999. I was appointed to fulfill the open position and term of Director Milton Metzger, who passed away earlier that year. In 2022, I was elected President and CEO of the Neffs Bank Corp. Incorporated, the parent company, and Chairman of the Board of the Neffs National Bank. I would like to say that it is the greatest honor of my life to play a small role in the success of the Neffs National Bank. I want to thank all our valued shareholders for their continued support, our employees for their dedication to the brand, and our loyal clients who realize the value of staying local. Strength, trust, community. As we pause to recognize this milestone of 100 years, let us never forget the past as we celebrate the future.